Recording is on.
Okay, so today's November 1st. We're continuing our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati, and we'll open it up. I think we had a few questions here.
Okay, sorry, Gary. I just I was going to make a suggestion about the Desiderata. So I think I'll offer to put everything that we finalized now, try and put it together, and then put it up on the Sirius website. Somebody else can do it. It doesn't have to be me, but if I do it, I can promise you I'm going to just put my own stuff in there, pretty much from what I put before at the beginning of the suggestion. So it'll definitely have my imprimatur on it if I do it. So if somebody wants that different, then they're quite welcome to do it. But I thought that once we have it up on the as an addressable place somewhere on the web, well, on the Sirius Institute website, then we can start doing stuff for the game, rabbit holes and trailheads and stuff that we can lead people to it. All sorts of stuff. So I thought that's what we should do next time. And then also, I don't think we've explored the whole thing enough. We could start developing, trails away from it. So some trailheads and stuff towards it, and then trailheads away from it, deeper into the kind of labyrinth. I thought that was what I thought we should do next. But what do people think?
I think it's a good idea because it was coming to an end, and we need to, we continue this. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. And it joins the initial idea of the ARG.
Yeah, okay. I'll get to it sometime, but I'm really focusing on the Darwin videos. Just finishing. I think I can finish off that in 2 more videos. So I want to finish that, and then I'll focus on doing that, and then we can come back. So won't be don't expect it very soon is all I'm saying, but I'll try and put it up, and then if anybody doesn't like what I put up there, or we can just discuss it and develop it. It doesn't have to be static. It's not in stone. In fact, it would be really nice if it actually developed as we went along. Mutated, changed, evolved, yeah. Okay, well, that's all. Yeah.
Can I claim to be a bit lost? But, what exactly are you putting up on the Sirius Institute?
So all the desiderata, each one of the points, I'll write them all up as HTML, and so that it's a web page on the on the website, on the Sirius Institute website. So then you can point to it with a link and stuff. I think it'll be HTML, not PDF. Yeah.
Are you going
especially
to
HTML, we can change it. We can change it without anybody noticing, which is also nice. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you going to do the 12 rules or 10 rules?
12.
12.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. There's a mystery rule, number 11, which I'll
Mike, you have disappeared.
I'm
Gary, I can't see you anymore.
I can see you.
Oh, I'm still here.
I can't see Mike and Gary. Ah, yeah. And Gary is in the dark.
Everybody's coming and going.
Yeah, I suppose there's funny connections.
Okay, so that's probably does it for that point. Should we move to the next one?
Right.
Sure. What are we doing?
Questions. You had some questions.
Well, I think so. Sophie, I've got a question, but Sophie she really expressed her interest last week, which is before I did. So, I mean, I'll leave it up to Sophie to go first if she wants to.
I sure know. Listen, we can always leave that. We're in the middle of this pandemic. We'll be churning our things and ideas about this virus for a long time. I think I was, I don't know where I was at the stage when I was asking this question, but we're more in line with what we're talking about in this project with the video, the thing on sabotage and surveillance. I think we should follow what you said, Gary. Let's discuss this first, and we can leave the virus for another full session.
Yep.
If everybody agrees.
Yeah. So, Hugh, can you see my question there that I put under the this week's meeting, or will I go over that again?
Yeah. Let me just go back to it. Okay. So here's okay. Mm. Mm. Oh, okay. Helping. Yeah. Yeah. So I always thought there are 2 points to this, and it goes back quite to my videos and much further, actually, to my often reference point, which is the cult that I was in. So I think that there are 2 things, and that's, the external world and work on the external world, as I called it in my videos, the second call of duty, and the first call of duty is then work on yourself. You can't really get far without doing work on yourself and evolving yourself. It's almost a dodge to try and change the whole world when you just stay the same dumb shit that you always were. Anybody that embarks on revolution soon finds out that they being changed as much as the world. It's not a thing where you manipulate things at arm's length like people might think if they're just new to activism and they're going to save the world. It's, well, part of that process, you're going to change yourself, or you're probably not doing anything serious. You're probably just dabbling if you don't find yourself changing. And it has to be that way because it is a two-way street. I think people like XR, they kind of get it, but don't kind of get it, because they say stuff like, be the change you want to be and stuff like that. But it's also pretty shallow. I mean, they don't be the change you want to be strikes me as being, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to change your habits, you have to change your culture. And it's far deeper than that. You have to change your consciousness and your awareness, your ego, your place in the universe. And to me, that all translates to very woo-woo stuff, which is you can't get into straight away and just bulldoze into, because it puts people off. But it really is transformation and enlightenment. So you can make any fantastic world you like. That's what everybody's found. The communists, all these idealists. That's you can only get so far changing the world, and then you can take yourself out of capitalism, but you can't take capitalism out of the person. And at some stage, every revolutionary gets to that point. So it's like we part and parcel of the problem, and so you can't have any sort of utopia without having an evolution of the people, not just a revolution in the world. And so that's pretty much where it is. So what that leads you to is, I think it's advantageous to just parcel it all up and just say, well, it's not us. It's just a module inside us. Call that module the alien cortex, and say that's the evil part of us. It kind of works well, I think, to compartmentalize it that way. So you don't get into the identity politics and, you know, the racism thing and stuff, and you just say, look, we all have this module in our head. It gets a bit sticky because some races, like Ashkenazi, you know, Ashkenazi Jews test very high for IQ, and IQ is just the way the alien cortex tests itself. So it is a bit of a minefield, but I think it's the best way to get round, you know, oh no, don't go in that direction because everybody winds up in a gas chamber if you go down there. And so, you know, the blaming and shaming thing is all a mess. I think that basically it just works better if you say we all have this kind of evil demon, and then you have to you know, the first call of duty is to exercise that demon from your head. It's often what anarchists say is, you know, get the cop in your head out. And then the second call of duty is to get the works of that cop in the world out as well. And when you do that, then you find out that, well, you don't really have to succeed. It's kind of like housekeeping. There's no milestone that you reach and then you say, hey, we've arrived at utopia. Because I don't believe there is that kind of utopia. It's sterile, and it's really the demon inside us says we want to get to the sterile, perfect world where nothing ever happens and history stops. And say, well, that's fucking hell right there. I couldn't bear to live in such a frozen, uninteresting, unlively world. So, you know, the life is full of risk and it's full of chaos and entropy, and that is part and parcel of life. So you can't have it too ordered and you can't have it too chaotic. It's life is the interface between those two. So mature anarchists are not idealists. They're not looking for some perfect world where suddenly we can all carry on with a pink halo and the world just works. Now, that's contrary to most people that are, say, activists. They say continually, we need to paint this vision of a wonderful world, then people be so attracted to it, they'll get to it. Well, you can't do that, because the wonderful world you really want to get to is a world without your alien cortex. And you can't advertise this utopia to your alien cortex. It's saying, you know, there's this wonderful paradise that we need to get to. But there's a bit of bad news. You can't go there. And the alien cortex is going to say, well, fuck you. I'll tell you one thing, we're not taking this journey. So you can't really sell it to the alien cortex. But there is a better world, a more evolved world. It's not entirely relativist. You can, you know, move forward to a more enlightened world, but it's not going to be without problems. It's not going to be without suffering. You're never going to evolve away from that. And these people, you know, like these fake Buddhists and stuff, that tell you that they're selling snake oil. You wouldn't want to live in the utopia. Did I even start answering the question, or was I completely off track?
Yeah, because it's kind of split the whole thing into two levels. It's like, you know, there's obviously this sort of level that field manual was operating at, where they were just trying to recruit people to do this if they could get them to. And then there's this sort of level you're looking at, which is of a vastly different nature. You know, I mean, it all seems to boil down to the person's degree of spiritual awareness. But it seems that as soon as you open your mouth about a topic like that, people either just switch off, or they absolutely can't comprehend what you're talking about. There's nothing in their experience that gives them a connection to that. And, you know, I'm looking at like, you know, just, you know, you talk about 500 lone wolves, but you might only find one who's capable of doing the work within himself or herself before even considering what they're going to be doing in the world. There's sort of a bit of an impasse between the need for action now and the sad fact that most people who are likely to end up doing it they're not going to be the right people doing it for the right reasons. Ultimately, it might look like it, but you know, I mean, I don't know what you can say about that.
The thing underlying everything you're saying is our alien cortex thinks in terms of a master plan and an outcome. So it's goal-oriented and it's fixated on fixing stuff. So what you're saying there is we have a determined outcome, in other words, like save the planet. And you're saying, well, we can't get there because of, most of the people can't take what's necessary on board to actually get to that result. Okay, the first thing is, what we're really trying to do is get rid of that module in our heads that say we need to get somewhere. What ultimately what we need to do is undoing, not doing. Everybody thinks we've got to do something. So that's one thing. It's the exact opposite. We've got to undo stuff. Now, to get somebody to reverse their course and start undoing stuff, you have to go very, very slowly. Just drop, 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 drop. It's a very slow drip feed. And then you see, people think if you're trying to get somewhere, they think, well, okay, we want this outcome. Now everybody has to play their part. And what you're saying is a lot of these people are too dumb to play their part. You say, no, it's not like that. The alien cortex wants to know everything up front, and it wants to know the outcome, and it wants to know the mechanism and see how the plan works before it'll even start. So in other words, to just make it really obvious, is people will say, okay, tell me what your plan is. And then they'll pick holes in the plan, and then they'll say this and that, and then they'll say, oh, we'll never get there that way. Or they'll say, okay, we might, but blah, but this has to happen in this way. And they're cooking. They're making a recipe. They're making an algorithm, say we run this program, and then we'll get to this result. It's never going to happen. Just go back in history. That never works out. For starters, as soon as you start some initiative in the universe, you wind up with Newton's third law, and you get an equal and opposite reaction. Because as soon as you move, there's an equal number of people that think exactly opposite to you, and they go, well, this is starting, the left wing is moving, we must counter that. And then before you know it, you're in quagmire. So
Look,
time is
how
running
do
out
we?
on us, and we'll miss the deadline. We're going to go straight over the cliff. We're not going to stop this train in time.
Oh, yeah.
So you can see it. The writing's on the wall. But that doesn't really matter. Everybody, it's your alien cortex that worries about that future and that outcome. And if there is any way we can survive, it would be by stopping that kind of thinking. So what it implies, if you just give it a bit of thought, is that there is nothing that you need to do, or some formula that you have to do, or convince people of all the parts they have to play. Really, you just carry on doing the right actions for removing the alien cortex. And so the fact we're going over a cliff doesn't change. You would do that right up until the last breath. You would do that. There isn't a point where you say, oh, well, this isn't going to work, and stop. If you have a plan and that plan has a shelf life, it's stupid.
Well, I think that what you were, sorry to interrupt, but what you were saying makes me think of what we were talking about in a previous session, when you say, when you talk about XR saying be the change you want to be, and these sort of plans for utopia. It goes back to a kind of religious feeling. It's a bit what you found in the Puritans, those sort of or even cults who have got this type of reasoning, and this is very endemic in XR, this kind of preaching, this kind of you have to do this, you have to do that, and there's a religious thing in that. There's very, very strong, and of course related to what you call the alien cortex, of course, because of the outcome.
So in my second video in the series, I spoke about this, but nobody really heard what I was saying. Well, even though I said it explicitly, nobody heard it. If you go back in history, what they're doing has been done a million times over. You can go and look at Jim Jones. You can go and look at Marshall Applewhite. You can go and look at the Owen Society. You can go and look at the mass. What they're doing now in XR is just chicken feed compared to the mass cultural movements in California in the 1960s. The movements outside the cities in those geodesic domes were some of the biggest mass movements of displacements of population in human history. The only time it was equaled was now where China industrialized and people moved to the urban areas. That was like the second major migration of people, mass migrations of people. But the 60s, my counterculture, no one in XR bothers looking at it. They're such narcissists that they think they're the first person that ever had this problem, and it's the first person that ever is going to find a solution, and they don't bother to go back in history and have a look. If you go back in history, go and look at Adam Curtis, the basically things like Machines of Loving Grace, that documentary that tells you exactly what happens if you try and go off grid and drop out, and nobody can hear it. But I say, what I said in my video now, hear me now. If you didn't get me from that first video, is if you go into one of those cultural counter movements, you break away, and then the same problems in the major society that you broke away from will rear their heads again. Why? Because you're bringing the alien cortex with you. The way I described it, it's like trying to escape from Jurassic Park with the velociraptor in the backseat of the car. You got to get the velociraptor out of the car. The velociraptor is your alien cortex. So it doesn't help that you get the nicest pie people in the world, like NXR, and you have a breakaway movement, and you go and do permaculture out in the woods. One of two things is going to happen. You're going to be chewed up on the inside from the alien cortex that you were really trying to escape from. You're bringing the poison with you. And the other thing is, you've just basically threatened the meta-alien cortex, and it'll come out and get you. It's not neutral. It's not. You might think you're a liberal and you live in a free society and you've got free choice. It's horseshit. If you break away from this society, it's a threat to the society the same way as you try and break away from the mafia. What state and our culture is running is a protection racket. If you bugger off from that protection racket, they will come and get you, just like the mafia will when you don't pay your protection money. So I'll give you countless examples in history of where people try to break away, even in South Africa, where after the Zulu War, then all the Zulus just decided, okay, well, we're screwed, but who cares? We'll go back to the land, and they became, semi-settled hunter-gatherers. Just had a hut, very nice life, few cows, a few goats, little maize patch, and they were completely outside society. Well, they didn't leave them there. That was a threat to the culture because they needed labor for the mines. So they got them off the land with all these devious tricks, like they gave a dog tax and a pole tax and a roof tax. And all of these things were designed to make the runaways participate in the system and go down the mines. They had to go and they weren't involved in the financial system. They like show them money. They said that's white man shit. They saw right through the game straight away. They wouldn't touch money with a barge pole. So they forced them to. That with a dog tax, you can't really live in Africa without a dog. So then they said either you got to get money or you got to get rid of your dog. Either way, you have to leave the kraal. And that's how they got them in the mines. Now, if you see what it's like in a South African mine at the turn of the century, it's unbelievable, way worse than a salt mine in Rome. So, but yeah, it's not neutral breaking away. It's neutral because the system will cut you a bit of slack because you're a privileged white liberal. But as soon as you're not a privileged white liberal and consumer anymore and you're an outsider, they will come and get you. Go and have a look at what happened to the diggers in 1342. They went off to common land and said, fuck this system, we're going to do permaculture. They had your idea in, 1,000 years ago in Britain. And guess what? They came and fucked them up. They came and beat them up. They got them off the land. They did every trick in the book because they knew if people follow their things, the whole of society will fall to bits. So it's not a neutral. It's a revolutionary act to try and break away and do permaculture. So you can't do it. You can start doing it, but you can only do it as far as you're not making any waves. As soon as you make an impact, which is what people are trying to do, they'll fuck you up. And nobody seems to get that. So just read your history, damn it. So you cannot break out of this culture for a number of reasons. First, the whole system is made by the alien cortex, let's just say. and you're taking that alien cortex with you. So
that's what you call the meta alien cortex. Is the alien cortex expanded to the system, to a kind of collective?
yeah, it's a
alien
Kantian
cortex.
whole. Do you see that video that I did with Stuart Kaufman, talking about a Kantian whole? All the parts contribute to the whole, and the whole contributes to the parts. You see, this is what the left doesn't understand about conspiracy theories, and conspiracy theorists to a certain extent too, is that they think there's some 12 guys around a table with hoods. So it's much worse than that. It's as if there might as well be 12 guys around a table directing everything, but it doesn't. There isn't really, but in effect there are, because it self-organizes that way. So the alien cortex will step by step make that system as if the 12 Illuminati are sitting around a table directing us, and they'll do it by decision, like, okay, what should we do with the kids all day? Well, we can't have them at home, and their parents need to go out to work, so we'll put them in these institutions. We'll cluster them in a school, and then what we're going to do in the school, and it evolves like that until eventually John Taylor Gatto says, like, hey, they're just making these schools for the factories and the soldiers. And you say, well, and then the left will say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. They're not farming us. They are. In effect, nobody sat down and said, we're going to fuck these people up and ruin their lives. But it gets that way because of the Kantian whole, because the part works to make the whole of the civilization work, and the civilization works to make the parts work. So that feedback dynamic winds up in the shitty terminal world that is about to make us go extinct. So it's far worse than even the conspiracy theorists think. It's the way to think about it is it's exactly like the conspiracy theorists think, but they're not 12 people. In fact, if there were 12 people in a room developing the New World Order, it would be way better, because you could go to those 12 people and talk some sense into them.
Yeah, that's an interesting
you
point.
have to talk sense into the entire Leviathan. It's really Hobbes's Leviathan. Yeah. No,
it's an interesting point you make here, because I've often wondered about that. When people say, "Oh, they're the what's the word? The designers of our social structure," as though it's deliberately done by some group of, when it's probably not so deliberate, but it can look like it's kind of tantamount, that you get the same result.
It's worse that it's not deliberate, because if it was deliberate, there'd be more error in it. Because it's not deliberate, it's almost perfect. So it's worse that the people are not making those decisions, one by one. You see, everybody, think of it this way: everybody in the system is doing their best. They're trying to be good. In John Taylor Gatto's school, every one of those teachers, they went there because mammalian brain said, this is a nice thing to do, and they're trying to be nice. The psychologists that'll push you back into the front lines of the suicide cult of ours, they're trying to be nice. They're trying to do the best for each one of the individuals, and that in effect winds up being the worst. Think of it as like the doctors in Auschwitz. It's what Derek Jensen talks about. Is each one of those doctors, they weren't thinking, oh, we're gonna fuck these inmates up. They were thinking, what's the best thing I can do for these inmates under the circumstances? Well, they didn't have the one thought that they should have had, and that's end this concentration camp system. That was inviolate. It never occurred to them that was even a solution. They just took it as read. So the doctors and the inmates never thought that getting rid of the concentration system was an option. It was just too big a thought. So taking that premise that there has to be a concentration system and there's no way out, it's just realities of life, Jordan Peterson style. From that premise, then you work to making things better under that premise is actually reinforcing the concentration camp. So everything after the doctors, you see, what the doctors should do is give, they should be working to destroy the concentration camp, and that ultimately would be the best thing for the patients they're treating, because the patients have got malnutrition and cholera and all these diseases from living in a camp and being worked to death in a labor system. So, so they try and help them piecemeal one by one, but they sell them out in a huge consequence, because what they should be doing is, poisoning the SS guards and making the system unworkable. You, as a doctor, they would have tremendous opportunity to bring down the system, but they never do. They accept the concentration system, and within that, try and be good. And then that in effect perpetuates the concentration camp system. So if you can get hold of one of those doctors and you say to them, you need to switch your allegiance away from helping people in the short term so you can end the system, which will ultimately help a lot more people in a lot bigger way in the long term.
Okay.
Now, there are obstacles to that, because they say, well, this is a huge thing, I'm a little part. And you say, well, yeah, sure, you're a little part, but every doctor just wants to do the right thing. So I say, look, I just told you what the right thing is. So just instead of patching people up and sending them back to work under the SS, just do what I'm doing, work to undermine the camp in every way, work to undermine the system in every way. But I must say one more thing just before you start, Matt.
Yeah.
You see, the Kantian hole works so that the experiment itself creates the outcome. Now, this is generally missed because our alien cortex only sees in terms of frames. Basically what I call Procrustean frames, very dangerous killer frames. That's the end of us, because what that limited scope is doing, they're thinking inside the box. Now, a great example is, say, the Cold War. So we almost came to the brink. We almost wiped ourselves out. I post so many videos about individuals that saved us on the brink of nuclear annihilation. Essentially lone wolves, right? That time and time again. Also, we know about the Russian ones. There were lots on our side. Kim Philby saved the world. Nobody knows that. But, all these individuals played a crucial role at a crucial time to make sure we didn't, by violating the rules. I mean, seriously violating the rules, like they would have been shot. Kim Philby would have been executed if he had been discovered. So anyway, this is the context. The Cold War, we're complete madness. It's utter paranoia and psychopathy, and we're about to really be annihilated. Now, how did we get to such a strange place? Well, we got that way because of John Nash and the RAND organization, and in particular game theory. So if you know about game theory, then the particular thing that got us to mutually assured destruction and to the brink so many times in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that, where we came right to the edge. We got there because of Nash was a schizophrenic, but I think it's more like psychopath. But anyway, he gave this mathematical model, which is now called the prisoner's dilemma, to show that the only way to do it is, the only way to really survive is a suboptimal outcome. You can't trust anybody, so you wind up in the Nash equilibrium, which is a shitty outcome for everybody, but that's the best you can do. And that was called the prisoner's dilemma, and it was the rational choice. It was rational choice that brought us to the most irrational thing of all, which was almost annihilation in the Cuban Missile Crisis and many others incidents. So it says, well, here's the interesting part. When they tested John Nash and all his fucking psychopath friends in the RAND organization that set up the insanity that we fought the strategy for the Cold War, when they tested the prisoner's dilemma on the secretaries in the office in the RAND organization, they found that they didn't sell each other out. And they thought, well, this is just an anomaly, right? They thought, well, are they a woman? They don't know what the hell. And they never saw the obvious. And that was, why didn't the test subjects behave in a rational way according to the prisoner's dilemma? And it's obvious. It's because they weren't prisoners. So the prisoner dilemma only works because you've taken this premise that nobody questions, and that's that we're prisoners. And you can't, they say, oh, well, that's invalid. You have to have that initial premise. It's part of the axioms, so it's axiomatic that we're prisoners. Now what do we do? Say, no, that's what you should have challenged. The secretaries never did that because they're never prisoners, and we're not prisoners. As soon as you cluster us in cities, you lock up the food, the land, and the sex, then we're prisoners. Then we're all competing for the same thing. There's a pecking order, right? That comes from centralization of resources. And that's what nobody will accept, that basically that is a false premise. We don't have to have urbanization. We don't have to have centralization. And if you do, then it's going to be a prisoner's dilemma outcome. But it's the society we set up that turns it into the prisoner's dilemma. Does that make any sense? That's the bit that nobody can get. Everybody thinks, no, the prisoner's dilemma is mathematical, it's abstract, it's absolute, and it just hangs somewhere in the air, and we all have to live by that logic. And say, no, you missed the fundamental premise, is that you made it that way by your assumptions, and those assumptions were thinking in the box. Literally, Nash was thinking in the box. The prisoner's dilemma is always shown with a little table, literally in boxes, and nobody gets it. So like, hey, wait, I mean, if you listen to anything I've said, you know that the alien cortex deals in boxes. Everything's geometric. So as soon as you see if you learned anything from me, as soon as you see the prisoner's dilemma and there's a box, you go, hey, wait a minute, this is alien cortex territory. It's a fucking box. So as soon as it's a box, you know that it's all about control. It's limited perceptual Procrustean perceptual frames, and it's illegitimate because, as Gödel said, it's incomplete. It's either Gödel and Turing said that if you do that kind of box conception, basically the alien cortex is a Turing machine. It's a universal Turing machine. It's a computer. So they say if you set up the world as a computer, which our brain does, then basically you will get the outcome where it's either inconsistent or incomplete. And that's what we refuse to believe. We think, no, we can make a perfect world where it's consistent, it's complete. In other words, social justice warriors will have everything fair and nice. You say, no. Turing and Gödel said with mathematical precision that what social justice warriors are trying to do is not possible. What social justice warriors and XR are trying to do is called the Hilbert program. Hilbert wanted to do this perfect justice world. It's kind of the same thing. It's just a rehash of this continual fucking nightmare that we just keep on rehashing, and communism and socialism and all these isms and capitalism. And well, the mathematicians' version of this was the most dangerous one. And it also went largely unseen. But where they were going was basically ruled by artificial intelligence. They wanted everything to be ruled absolutely perfectly. And their version of that was then it would be rational. And to do that, you do a machine. So the computer was invented. Alan Turing invented the computer to show them why that vision is not possible. And they refused to listen. They just ran. That was in 1936. They just ran forward into Second World War. And they took the computer, his invention, to show them that you can't run the world as a computer, and went forward into AI and stuff like that. We carried on as if Alan Turing and Gödel didn't exist. And so that's why we're in so much shit. But now these latter-day social justice warriors and stuff come in organizations like XR and all these idealists and say, what you're trying to do is the Hilbert program. You don't want to do that. It's a nightmare. And anyway, it's not legitimate because your utopia would be either inconsistent and incomplete. It's actually fucking unworkable. You don't even want to start down that path. But this is the path that we're on. So okay. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Can I go back a bit to? Sorry, Sophie, do you want to say something? I just need a moment to think out how I'm going to ask this. Do somebody else want to say something?
I'm just thinking about what you said there, and it's really, thank you very much. It's so clear. And do you know what it makes me think when you talk about the conspiracy theories? It makes me think that what they all call the Illuminati is the alien cortex.
It is.
You know
No, it is. You see, I mean, I say it's just a part of our our brain, and functionally, just take a chimp. Everything that we have more than a chimp and a bonobo, just call that working complex, the alien cortex. I say that, but really, I'm not being entirely honest. It is a principle of the universe. It's an organizing principle of the universe. There seem to be two fundamental organizing principles. I could go into it, but there's a reason for duality, and really, there is digital processing is not an invention of ours. The part you see, it's kind of like physics, the wave-particle duality. Nature is a strange mixture between the wave, which is analog, and the particle, which is digital. And so the digital part is our alien cortex. Our alien cortex is not some incidental accident. It's an organizing principle. It's the digital organizing principle of the universe. So it's way deep. But you can't really go there because, this is so mind-blowing for literally blowing your alien cortex up. But it's so mind-blowing already that you got to take it a bit at a time. You can't just blow people completely away with the thing. But yeah, you must. In Christian terms, it would be Satan and God and stuff like that. It's those things are really legit in a way that you've got to work with the culture and communicate to people in their language and their perceptions and their belief system. So within the belief system, you have to communicate this information. But if you're in the Middle Ages, you just say, yeah, it's a demon inside us. And you wouldn't be wrong. You would be wrong.
The demon using a binary mathematical system to run a computer. Yeah.
Yeah.
The binary system was, just, yeah, there's so many things. You're right, it could be mind-blowing. What, am I getting a headache now?
That's your alien cortex trying to keep up. But you see that you must embrace that headache. Basically, the headache and nausea and stuff is frying your alien cortex. And one day it gets fried, and then you're enlightened. and then it's not utopia after that, right? But it's 100% better. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but the trouble, it keeps trying to save itself, though. It's very good at saving itself. When the temperature starts to get up, it says something like, "Oh, I don't think I'll come to the meeting tonight with you. It's getting a bit much," you get into this pulling back from which gets me to what I wanted to say. Do you mind if I just move the whole thing back to where you were before launching into that bit? Is where we were with the field manual and this question of where you're acting from. Because if you just look down the Reddit posts that are there, on the surface of it, they seem to be appealing to just an ordinary, everyday reaction to a situation, and that's not what you really want. As you're saying, you want people to sort of have their inner rebellion first, and then act from that position.
No. Simultaneously, you can't have one without the other. They lean on each other. They're mutually supporting.
Oh, okay.
Like,
yeah. So this is like an electromagnetic propagation where you need one and that makes the next one and all the rest of it.
You actually get energy. You actually get any if you do something that's really taboo, like eco-charge or something like, you get a spike of adrenaline and some. Get a lot of endorphins and stuff afterwards and stuff. So it's you're doing what a lot of psychopaths do, and that's they live off nervous energy. If you keep on, putting yourself in front of tigers, you can be pretty active. The secret to all these, highly motivated people and stuff is they're doing what psychopaths do. They put themselves on the edge. They put themselves in front of tigers so that they have to, their life depends on them moving fast. And then people say, I don't know how you do it. And you say, well, they're living close to the edge. That's how they do it. Is they've got an endless amount of adrenaline and stuff because, you know, they're right on the edge. The whole thing could blow up in their face. They're like con men all the time. They're like con men doing a long con, and it's, you know, they got to be on their toes, and it's very you see, that's exactly like Zen enlightenment, right? So they are very high functioning, and they have a very high awareness, and the reason is because they live in on the edge. But it's not such a bad thing. You can actually do it. When you're feeling down and stuff and you want a bit of energy, where people go and run around the block, well, that'd give you a sort of an energy, but they would call that gross energy. They call it rajas. In Indian Hindus would call it rajas. If you want sattva and stuff and finer energy, yeah, you go do a bit of ecotage and stuff, and then you'll feel charged up way more than running around the block.
Sorry, I was trying to Google sattva energy, this kind of thing, and I couldn't spell it. Could you help me out?
It's spelled in different ways because it's actually Sanskrit, but it's sha, so that's the sha symbol from there. But it's normally transliterated into English as SHATTVA.
Okay, thank you.
Or SATTVA. Sometimes the H is there, and sometimes it's I think sha in Sanskrit is not always aspirated.
I googled it once, and I googled it under three gunas. I think
Yeah, that's the
GUNNA,
better way
and then
to go.
you'll find all of them.
Yeah, that's the better way to go. GUNA, the guna, and they're basically qualities of the universe, and we have them in the West, but we've changed them slightly. So we would say, well, you know, Thomas is the Higgs boson. It's like, oh, okay, if you insist. And then they'd say, like, you know, Rajas is energy or light or something. And you go and ask a scientist, what's energy? He won't be able to tell you in any better than like an ancient Hindu mystic can tell you what Rajas is. But he'll leave you with the strong impression that, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson and, you know, the Shankaracharya are talking about exactly the same thing when they talk about Rajas. So sattva in our conception would be light. It's electromagnetism. But what we often forget is we haven't got a fucking clue what electromagnetism is. And the people that realize that least are physicists and electronic engineers. They forget that we haven't got a faintest idea what it is.
May I follow up on a question related to what Gary is asking? I think it was just earlier today you had said that individuals, ideally to be effective, could work on ourselves first, our individual selves, before we can. I took it that it was kind of sequential, that the work on oneself had to be done first before one can even hope to affect the world. But then little recently you said they can be concurrent. It's not like we have to be spiritually evolved, or we've gone through psychosis, or we've broken the alien cortex of our own before we can even affect the world. So what I'm getting is that this little acts of drip by drip, actions against the system is part of how we're working on ourselves. Like it's a feedback thing between the two endeavors. Am I getting it?
Yeah, very much, very much. So that's right. Just one thing I'd say though, that it is a language for one side of the looking glass. So if you step through the looking glass, in other words, if you go through psychosis or enlightenment, there's no more work to do after that. So this temporary scaffolding that would disappear after enlightenment. You see, you have an idea of a result, so in other words, you're saying like, oh, I should start and perfect myself, then I can start perfecting the world. And say, well, when would you know that you'd perfected yourself? You would never start on the world. You'd have an infinite project. Perfecting yourself is meaningless, right? So enlightenment doesn't mean perfection. There's a whole industry selling enlightenment, and they sell it as perfection. And they have a vested interest in doing that because they don't ever want you to get there. But perfection is meaningless. What the fuck would it even mean? You see, alien cortex is telling you that I can get order. I can sort things out. So it's basically, it's trying to get things digital, organized. It's doing the Hilbert program. See, Hilbert was doing that. He was saying, once we can get the fundamentals of logic and mathematics, then we can basically systematize them. Once we've systematized them, then we can basically make everybody in the world subordinate to them. In other words, you'd have an oracle machine that would settle legal cases, would decide the best form of government. You have no idea how far these guys were going to go with this shit. And still, the AI guys are still on that program. They're still on the Hilbert program 100 years later. So 120 years later, they're still on this program. But so this program is your alien cortex's program for perfection. He was Hilbert wanted to get to this world that was utterly irrational, so that you wouldn't need politicians. Politicians irk the hell out of a mathematician because they're so fuzzy and they're so inconsistent and they're so irrational, and it's just like, fuck them. We're going to take them out of the picture. We're going to make us absolute. We're going to make the law. We're going to do justice. We're going to have judges sit in court, and they will do justice with mathematical precision. So then you have an oracle machine, and all that it needs to do, it's utterly logical. All you need to do is to feed it information. The only way you can go wrong is feeding it misinformation or wrong information. And if you go far enough, you can eliminate misinformation and wrong information from the system, was their assumption. And now you're kind of doing the same thing, thinking of yourself that way. So first I'll turn myself into a perfect oracle machine. Well, Turing and Gödel said, no, you can't do that. You'll never be perfect because it'll be inconsistent or incomplete. If you say, okay, I'm finally perfect, now I can start working on the world, I can always just ask you a few questions, and I'll soon say, no, you fucked up. You've got this idea in your head, it contradicts this idea in your head. So you're either inconsistent, or I said, have you thought about this? And you go, oh, fuck, no, I didn't think about that. You say, and then you're incomplete. But the essence of Turing and Gödel incompleteness is self-reference. So to show you how difficult this problem is, there's a lot of mathematicians who still want to do the Hilbert program. They wouldn't accept the results in 1936 from and 32, I think, from Gödel. 32, I think, and Turing 36. But those results, they rejected them and saying like, okay, the heart of why we fucked up is self-reference. Okay, because of self-reference, you will always be, in essence, always trying to square the circle, and you'll never manage it. So Gödel showed from tables, basically from Cantor's tables, that if you make, in essence, you make everything into an algorithm. So every court case would be an algorithm. You'd say like everything you do in life would be decided. It was law, basically a law, just a formula. So what Gödel showed that if you use Cantor's method of diagonals, you can say there's always some formula that is outside the system. You're always trying to get to it, and you never will. So what that means in practical terms is you could always come up with a court case where the machine couldn't decide. It would either go out to lunch, and you never know if it's going to take 1,000,000 years to make a decision in this court case, or the court case was undecidable.
By the way, this is when we're handing over our control of decisions in our society to AI. This is a viable attack against these AI systems as well. So for example, a lot of the visual AI systems will you can design a specific picture that will look like, say, a penguin, and it will be specifically targeted to that AI to make it think that it's a basketball, right? So you can provably always get this counter case that can cripple any modern AI system based on deep learning.
And what I immediately thought of there was, the Google image identification for gorillas, and then, if you know what that was about. But the Google identification for the gorillas fiasco was. I saw a lot of people in computing, in the business. Actually, they worked with AI, which was disturbing to me. And they said, like, it's unbelievable how we actually putting our prejudices even into our algorithms as into some of these learning machines. We as humans are corrupting the machines, even with our racism. They're kind of Hilbert saying, like,
Right.
You can't get away from human fucking things up. We even put our racism into these things. And I didn't have the heart to tell them that. I said, look, you're thinking it's a supervised learning machine. There are two types of learning machines, supervised and unsupervised. Supervised means the guys, they tweak it in the back. You remember that AI thing with the Go playing, the AlphaGo that I posted, that documentary on AlphaGo, playing Go? They had all the guys in the back, they're sitting there tweaking, they like spot something and they change a little bit. That's called a supervised learning machine. Now, what these guys I was mentioning, we're talking about the racism, and they thought there must be a supervised. No, it's very unlikely that was a supervised learning machine. It would have been an unsupervised learning machine. So then what it meant is the machine did a very, very good job, in fact, just associating, because we are gorillas, we're fucking primates. So the machine figured out amazing thing that, humans are fucking primates, and it said it out there, and then it was a complete violation of our politically correctness. And so everybody's head exploded. And I know what the guys in Google did. They just went back and they put in a line there saying, if it's gorilla, just take out the gorilla. The identification is too dangerous. So they went in and fucked with the machine. In other words, they violated Hilbert's purity to try and get the machine to do Hilbert's purity. And that, in a way, shows how fucked up we are. Does that make sense? It gives you a hint of why we could never get there, why we're chasing our tail. So these people in pursuit of perfection are fucking themselves up as they go. It's almost a Gödel and Turing result.
Can I go back to? Oh, go on. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if I could derail the conversation a little bit, because I don't know what was talked about before because I missed the time zone switch. But I was wondering if I could talk about the techno-utopians and their sense of meaning.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm a reforming techno-utopian, and
recovering. Now, I'm a recovering engineer.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a recovering engineer. Yeah,
recovering engineer as well. So I'm not quite philosopher gardener yet, but the thing about the techno-utopians is their mantra, at least in the Foresight Institute, is existential hope. So as a counter to existential dread. So when you think about the Gene Roddenberry vision of the future, of we're all going to be vegetarians and there's going to be no money and we're just going to explore space and it's going to be great and we're going to shag all the aliens, that was something in the future that pulled us towards a positive future, right? Instead of being afraid of what could all go wrong in 1984 and being paralyzed by that fear, it was let's build Motorola and make the communicators from Star Trek real. That was their idea. And so they're trying to preserve this now in the face of all of these existential threats. And these people are trying to be kind of practical, level-headed about the possibility of extinction through various means, AI and global warming and asteroid impact and all kinds of stuff. Right? They're very into that, and also the effective altruist community is kind of there's a lot of overlap there. But what I found kind of bad is like if the methane bomb goes off or is going to go off, like then all of that hope is kind of terrible. And so like what I've been struggling with is, there's this deriving meaning in life from that. Like I felt a lot of meaning from that before, the Star Trek vision of things, the Neil deGrasse Tyson, like we're all stars, Sagan, we're all star stuff, this kind of oneness with the universe. That's where I got my meaning for most of my life. And I see there's also meaning in struggle, rebellion, that kind of thing. Like I see there like pretty much the opposite